The results for yesterday's UK election are now in, and while it turned out that, of course, the exit polls were not 100% accurate, the Conservative Party did end up losing a lot of seats, and they can no longer create a single-party majority in Parliament. So if we could bring up this first chart, you're going to see how it actually shook out in the end. So you're seeing the Conservatives there with 318 seats, 8 short of a majority, but also I think something like 6 or 8 up on what we thought they'd have from the exit polls. Labour jumping up there, gaining 29 seats in this election. You see the Scottish National Party dropping a significant portion of the seats that it had. And if we could jump to this next graphic, you're gonna see the change in vote share. And so you're seeing there that the Conservatives actually gained a little bit as a percentage because the other smaller parties dropped so much. And it seems like some of the UKIP vote clearly going to the Conservatives there, but Labour jumping up by even more. And I've actually seen it described as the largest vote share gain that the Labour Party has gotten in an election, from election to election, since 1945. And so Theresa May's strategy of calling this snap election to consolidate the gains, whoopsie.
Yeah, it's tough to see that as a vote of anything but no confidence.
Well, we live in Donald Trump's America, so that must be a win. She keeps winning.
Yeah, she did. She is still, single biggest party. And it seems like it's likely that a combination of the Conservative Party and the Democratic Unionist Party could form a governing coalition. We're gonna talk a little bit about that based on my long knowledge about the DUP from today, and what that might mean. But I know that you were talking before the show about how we have this snap election, which the best description I saw of it was that they were able to initiate, plan, and conduct a nationwide election in the time between the Georgia special election and the runoff.
Yeah, I mean, it's really something to behold, especially given our system, which is this big laboring system, of course, with the longest runway before the actual election, at least when we talk about the head of state. But you're probably thinking like, well, what would happen if they had a snap election? They call for a snap election today in the US. Well, of course, we couldn't do it in the speed that John just mentioned, obviously, but you'd also think that Trump would not get the even meager vote of confidence that he got. I know he won the Electoral College, he lost the popular vote, and he would likely, I think, be repudiated by this electorate were they able to hold that snap election today. But it's really a parliamentary thing. We don't do it in our system, the best system in the world, and as a result, we have to look at these other. And it's interesting that it bears speak about one more thing. She can't just call for it, can she, John? Right, JR?
So there has to be a coalition of 2/3 of also the governing body to make sure that they can call for this to happen. So again, with parallels to how it could happen, there would also have to be the same way that no one expects, I don't know who, maybe someone does, no one really expects the Congress and the Senate or anyone in Congress to come together and maybe write up articles of impeachment for the president now because they're in his back pocket. Their interests are keeping him around, even for their own personal interests, even if they don't agree with everything he does and how he does it. So it would still need to have a 2/3 majority of the rest of the body to make it happen.
Yeah, that's true.
So it kind of would still be a problem to happen.
Exactly. Actually,
or if there's a vote of a lack of confidence, I forget the terminology now, because as you said, John, we've been knowing about this for years now.
Yeah.
No, it's a new system, but it's worth looking because we always hear, well, we have the best system in the world. It's a classic adage that's thrown in by every politician. The Americans is the best system in the world. And when you look around at these parliamentary systems, and there are a lot of them. I mean, not just
far more than presidential systems.
Right. Yeah. You kind of are always struck, especially in the shadow of what's just happened with our election. What would it be like if we had a sort of a parliamentary system where you had to form coalitions, where compromises were forced? I don't know that it would necessarily be better, but this kind of thing would all of a sudden be a possibility.
Yeah, and look, people love when I mention that I was in political science academia. So I'll do it again. If you actually look into how parties are formed and all that in the US, you do have a lot of that. You just don't see it explicitly. I mean, parties are coalitions of different interests. Like the Republican electorate is not one type of voter, it's several types of voters. Now in a parliamentary system, those would probably be several parties of varying sizes, and the Democratic Party would be the same. I think that there are a lot of good things to be said for parliamentary systems, and I think that theoretically, if we could see the US today, but as a parliamentary system, what it would look like, I think that would be incredibly interesting.
Yeah,
but there are theoretically some downsides as well that people, I think, gloss over.
And before you get, or if you have time to even touch on any of those, it would be interesting just from the standpoint of the dialogue that you would have in this nation. Right now we have two parties that are edging out everybody else.
Yeah.
And I think you're really right to point to the fact that most people might look at the Democrats or Republicans and go, those guys don't represent me. I mean, virtually.
I think most people do say that, yeah.
Yeah, and so you end up with those two parties that don't really represent anybody in some sense. They represent sort of an institutional view of the populace, edging out everybody else on the stage, right? The debates are a joke.
Yeah, they certainly represent very few people very well.
Right.
Like some people might be like, yeah, I've always voted for this party, but very few people love them. Now, like you could theoretically change to a parliamentary system, but you could also just institute something like ranked choice voting or approval voting or something like that, which would allow for more parties in the system, but still be in a presidential system.
Well,
so there's a lot of ways that you can try to fix it.
With the kind of system we do have, then we have more of the, and I say it over and over again, this my team versus your team feel, so that people don't even necessarily have to look so deep into the agendas or the policies that one party or another actually pushes, but just what they perceive for them to push and say, I've always voted this way because my grandfather told me to, therefore I'm a lifelong this, and then my team's gonna keep winning. And once you win, you go, yeah, we won. You have no idea whether or not that party actually represents your values.
I think JR's point is really good given this moment in time. We're at a time now where the electorate is increasingly not connected to information that's worth a shit. And so you're ending up with, I think, more of that them versus us, just as he says, so sort of a blind voting. So in that sense, if we were to, I mean, just to extend this bizarre hypothetical, it will never happen, but to go to a parliamentary system, you might have a little less of that because you'd have more choices from the menu and you might have to evaluate more carefully.
There is still, I mean, I know in the UK there is still a lot of that. My family has always been for this party. So look, the world is going to suck no matter what we do. Let's make it suck a little bit less. Yeah. Now, as I pointed out, the conservatives would probably have to go along with the Democratic Unionist Party if they wanted to create a two-party governing coalition. So I read up on the DUP, and it's a party that a lot of people have a lot of problems with, especially inside of the UK, because of their past affiliation with extremist groups, and they're about as far right as you can get in the British political context. I mean, they're anti-same-sex marriage, they're hard against abortion, and a number of other things like that, which means that if theoretically the Conservative Party, which isn't as far to the right as that, has to ally with them, that's gonna make governing kind of weird and a little bit uncomfortable in a way that I don't think Theresa May was expecting.
And this is that coalition part that is weird, right?
Yeah.
Now you have to make nice with what's a little like making nice with the extreme right wing of the Republican Party.
Exactly. And we've seen what effect that could have.
Things like happened when the Tea Party branch came forward, and then they were pulling them further in that direction. So in order for them to continue to have any kind of pull or get their own agenda, original agenda accomplished, they have to start giving in to that direction more. So I mean, this seemed like good news when we heard the way it came out, and which it is. So it came out a big loss for Theresa May, but could be some losses in there anyway.
Yeah, she may be forced into bed with this party that may do a lot of things that are really not going to be that great for Britain.
Exactly. So why is it that we had this result in the UK? I'm sure there's a lot of reasons. Obviously, it's the timing, it's some of the statements by Theresa May, some of the policies she's pushed. But one incredibly important element of this was the just incredible enthusiasm amongst younger voters to get involved and to cast their vote. So early reports have suggested that as many as 72% of young people voted in this general election, which that's a lot. We don't approach anything like that here in the US. We don't know for sure if that'll be the final number, but for comparison's sake, in the last 4 general elections from 2001 to 2015, youth turnout was only around 40%. Which means that it almost doubled in this election. You're seeing there even in the EU referendum, which that's incredibly important, especially for those who will be alive for a long time, like younger people. It eclipsed even that in this most recent election. And I mean, we've seen that the vote share in some of these areas was very close. That is easily enough to swing a number of seats to Labor. And it looks like the breakdown of the vote was around 2/3 of 18 to 24-year-olds voted for Labor, 1/3 voted for Conservatives or another party. Now, some people are looking at this and their conclusion, which I think seems reasonable, is, well, theoretically, if you hypothetically had a left-wing populist leader in the US context, maybe that would matter for elections. Now, historical note that I think matters, in the Democratic primaries and caucuses, Mr. Sanders won 70% of the under 30 vote. And so theoretically, some people are saying, well, if that had been a factor on election day in the general election, maybe we would have seen something a little bit more like the UK.
I don't know what the beef is all about. Hillary Clinton ran. It's obvious that the American people are leaning completely right, and that populist left-wing candidate that you just spoke of, Hillary Clinton, apparently didn't appeal to everyone. I don't know what you're talking about.
Weird.
But
Yeah.
there's other aspects to this, and again, I'm always a little worried when it comes to another country's system.
We try to apply it to
or
ours.
leaders,
Yes.
yeah, we apply it to ours. But
Sometimes
that's
we
just
do
the
it
way
too
we
much.
are. It's just the way we are. Well, it's not all we can do, but it's a natural inclination for us to pull that way. But I think sometimes it's something outside of just. It's part of that. Someone with the right kind of message and approach to getting voters out, the way Bernie Sanders was able to do, was also there's a big event. Brexit was this big thing that the entire world was talking about for good reason. And then now this particular snap election would affect how they do it. Of course, whoever wins, we knew the leadership was still gonna make it happen, whether or not it's gonna be a soft or a hard exit. So that made more people feel energized to make sure they have some voice in how this happens. So with that in mind, look the way we're approaching these. We've been a few months into Donald Trump's presidency. People can't wait for the next, maybe midterm.
Right.
People starting to realize that a midterm election means something. Because as they watch how the coalition still forms behind this clueless president, they're thinking, oh, you mean other members of Congress or other elections count?
Yeah.
We're finally figuring out it's not just a presidential election.
Again, I think my short sleeve friend has a point, and it is that this might have been Brexit, the shock that a lot of people who weren't involved in the process needed to get involved in that process in Britain. And now the parallel, the Trump election and all the things that followed may be the shock to our system, although it's a nasty one to get younger people and more people invigorated to be part of the political system here.
They were in the primaries of this one, so there was that shock. It's just
they were discouraged once their candidate was.
Exactly, and so there was still that strong arm of the DNC or the whole system had happened in the primaries that still shut it down, which then actually will build an even stronger anger.
Yeah, I mean, we're not facing a Brexit necessarily, but there's, every day we get a little bit closer to Obamacare being taken away, and you've got the devastating tax plan that's being debated. You have us pulling out of Paris and stuff like that, and that's extremely consequential. So hopefully people will be inspired in the midterms to vote and try to correct some of that. I would have personally preferred that we not had that situation in the first place.
Of course.
Because you can do a hell of a lot of damage in 2 years, and Trump has already done that. But yes, it could be a silver lining in about a year and a half.
What's in TYT membership? Not gonna tell you. Only one way to find out. TYTnetwork.com/join.